when the concept of trade came about, that's when they realized that people or countries cannot be self-reliant. So they need to trade amongst themselves, and it's always good to start with your neighbor when you are trading. We talk of intra-African trade, then to mean intracontinental trade. Africa as a continent. How can we have exchange of goods and services within the continent?
All the experts, all the strategic studies, AU, ECA, African Development Bank, EU, even the US, everybody agrees that Africa desperately needs to boost inter-African trade.
When you expand trade across borders, when people are able to go into the foreign country and invest, clearly you bring in skills, you bring in innovation, you have new products, so the countries are able to tap into their resources more efficiently and more economically.
If I try to borrow statistics from one study that was done jointly by African Union Commission and Economic Commission for Africa in 2012, the findings were that the state of intra-African trade was at 12%, which is a very low statistic.
Compared to Western Europe, it's more than 60%, and North America more than 40%.
And the good news is that there's been improvement on that. Recently, I read a report by UNCTAD, which says that in 2014, intra-African trade has gone up to 16%, so which is a good indication that we are doing at least improvement. But it is still low. We cannot say that we have achieved. It is still very low, and it is causing many challenges to the continent.
I think we've already lost a lot, because what we are doing, if you look at our trading patterns, we are exporting primary commodities. So Ethiopia is producing coffee, we export the raw coffee beans, somebody out there will add value to the coffee, or Ghana is exporting cocoa and somebody will add value to the cocoa and bring chocolates that many Africans can barely afford, and it's with income levels that are actually already very low. So we are losing jobs by not being able to add value. We are also losing the cohesion, and I would say the stability that comes with being able to work and trade with your neighbors.
There are some elements that we also have to take into consideration, like what I know is that in the East African community, more than 40% of their trade is done informally. So this means informal cross-border trade, which is not captured by those statistics, may also contribute to the improvement of intra-African trade once captured.
It is true that there is informal trade across borders, but again, if you look at what it is that we are exporting and importing, even if you counter these numbers, I do not believe that they will significantly increase our intra-Africa trade from 13% to, for example, the 30% that we wish to see very soon.
We are working on it, and we hope that in the next decade we'll reach from 20 to 25%.
While there are many challenges to intra-Africa trade, one of the big challenges is the infrastructure deficit.
Infrastructure in Africa is not developed. You look at the roads, the status of our roads, even all the means of transport that are available to the businessmen are not in a good status. We have trade-related infrastructure development programs. We have PIDA. PIDA is a program for infrastructure development for Africa.
That covers 4 sectors: transport, energy, ICT, and transboundary water.
We subscribe to what they call the Trans-Coastal West African Highway, which starts from Lagos and now goes all the way to Dakar. And it's about over 4,000 kilometers.
There is a lot of projects going on. For example, here in Ethiopia, there is the road and railway between Addis and Djibouti. It's under construction. Also, there is a road between Addis and going to Mombasa.
That has been very much fruitful, successful in bringing about, easy mobility, people-to-people relationship, and of course the further consolidation of trade among these countries.
One of the projects that Egypt is specifically taking care of is the VicMed project. VicMed project is a project that should link the Mediterranean to Victoria Lake through the Nile, including Ethiopia. Ethiopia have asked to join this initiative, and it has been approved. So we are talking now about linking Ethiopia, the Great Lake region, to the Mediterranean. So one day I can take a boat from Alexandria and reach Ethiopia by the boat.
Once this program is implemented, I think some of those challenges related to transport and infrastructure bottlenecks will be addressed. The cost of doing business in Africa is very high, especially because the cost of energy is very high. So there are ongoing projects on energy development in the region that will make the cost of production very low.
In terms of energy, there is the West African gas pipeline. We have interest in it, and even though the supply has not been regular, then also there's the West African power pool. If you go on the net, you see that Ghana is actually negotiating with Cote d'Ivoire for extra power supply. We also do export some power. So there is this sharing thing.
Ethiopia is now interconnected with Djibouti. We are working to interconnect with Kenya. It's working also to interconnect with Sudan, thinking about how to interconnect all the way up to Egypt.
Build a lot of infrastructures will demand a lot of funds and financing from, I hope, our partners, but also from our own funds, national funds.
Okay, through provision of credit facilities, so that African countries can develop their own power sectors, railway transportation systems, etc. Because we know that once you develop your projects at a national level, it will feed into the region.
One of the innovative ways of financing infrastructure is the floating of infrastructure bond, which has been done in Kenya, in Zambia, in Rwanda, and I think it is used also in the Millennium Dam, where the Cuban government has put the construction, the shares for the public to buy shares and contribute.
So many things that we need to overcome, including, of course, the tariffs, the high tariffs, and then the non-tariff barriers, and then the border checkpoints. If you take ECOWAS, for example, to move from Nigeria to Abidjan, it's incredible the number of border checkpoints that you have to go through. And of course, there are cases of corruption as well.
Unless you have a reduced transit time, you cannot compete globally. Our import, our export will not compete with other competitors. For example, if we are going to export our coffee, be it manufacturing goods or other perishable goods, we have to compete with other countries.
Another challenge that hinders trade, there is information, lack of information. The information flow. I think there is no system that links traders amongst themselves across the borders to understand the status of the market's need. what do they need in the western part of Africa that the East is producing? What do they need in the southern part that North Africa is producing? So that lack of information sharing also hinders the progress of intra-continental trade.
The ability for people to move between across borders, that's another issue. Lack of free movement of persons, because you cannot trade or you cannot provide a service if you cannot be able to move.
Ethiopia is joining this Free Skies in East Africa. That is good business for Ethiopian airlines, you know. It creates jobs, you know. It also facilitates movement, you know. So if you live in East Africa now, you don't only have to rely on Kenya Airways or Rwanda Airways. East Africa is there. But of course, it also creates competition, which means that each of the airlines has to become more efficient, you know. But in the end, all of that should facilitate the movement of Africans.
One of the areas where ECOWAS is doing very well is in free movement of people. You will travel from Senegal to go to Nigeria only with an ID with a photograph. You don't need a passport because there's free movement of people in that region.
In IGAD, we have a protocol on free movement of persons. It is looking at very many aspects of facilitating rather than hindering free movement of people. It's looking at common transit documents like a common visa, like a common passport. It is looking at open skies policy, whereby you harmonize the policies for air transport. It is looking at one-stop border posts. These are trade facilitation instruments that ease the movement, the transit of cargo, the clearance of cargo, which reduces the cost of doing trade among member states. There are also initiatives which are looking at boosting intra-African trade.
One is having a common trade policy, looking at how to harmonize trade policies at regional level and at continental level to make sure that the way trade policies are crafted is not hampering the movement of goods and services across the region. There is also a program on trade facilitation that will address some of those administrative challenges that I have mentioned above. And the trade facilitation program will also implement the trade facilitation agreement that has been signed by at WTO, at World Trade Organization level in 2013. So there are so many initiatives that have been taken across the continent to make it easier for goods to cross borders by harmonizing customs procedures, by introducing the so-called one-stop border post.
The one-stop border post is one of the ways in which we want to help African countries facilitate the movement of goods and people across borders. As I said earlier, it's really very expensive for you to move many kilometers. Let's say from Addis Ababa, you're going to be traveling to Kenya, and you reach the Moyale border, and you have a check on this side, which takes time, and then you cross over, and you have another check on the other side. So the one-stop border post allows you to go to the border to do one check of everything. Both countries have agreed on how that should work, and then you cross over to the other side.
Imagine before the concept of the one-stop border post, the truck can take at one-stop border post around 7 days to cross. Now the trucks, for example, at Chirundi one-stop border post, which is constructed by Zambia, and it is the first one-stop border post in Africa, the truck take less than 2 hours to cross the border.
This is what we are looking for through this establishment of Djibouti corridor. And we hope that some products originating from Ethiopia can easily go to South Sudan or to Djibouti, or from Djibouti to South Sudan, or from Sudan to Ethiopia. And certainly through these links, we hope that the intertrade between our countries will increase.
Introducing the concept of electronic single windows at the customs, at the country levels and others. That is what is being done on trade facilitation.
apart from the one-stop border posts, you have initiatives which are focusing on FTAs. These are free trade areas. So free trade areas look at customs unions, they look at common market protocols.
And out of that, we now have the process towards the establishment of the Continental Free Trade Area.
We have an indicative date, 2017, for most of these regs to have completed their FTA protocols. At IGAD, we are already embarking on the FTA protocol.
ECOWAS has moved from a free trade zone to now a custom union since 2005. That means they have a unique external tariff in common. That means things coming outside the ECOWAS and entering that zone will be subject to only one tariff.
You have an East African community, a Southern African community. You have the COMESA, as you mentioned. Some of them have overlapping membership. Some countries are members of COMESA, like Tanzania, a member of SADC as well. And while it may pose some challenges sometimes, for instance, when you're trying to harmonize policy, if the SADC policy is different from the COMESA one, then Tanzania is sort of in between, it still offers the opportunity to learn.
You've seen the recent initiative where you have the tripartite free trade area, which is looping in about 3 big regional economic communities, namely East African Community, COMESA, and SADC. And IGAD is also sharing membership in terms of member states with these. And this is a very, very big breakthrough.
The 3 of them, as I've said, they constitute 26 countries. So what we are trying to do is to surmount the fact of regs and go beyond that. We are talking about a free trade agreement between 26 countries.
What is likely to happen, or the immediate target that I know from the last summit, they want ECOWAS, which has about 250 to 300 million people, to negotiate and join the tripartite agreement, which has over 500 people. Then it means that at least about 2/3 or more of the continent would have started some customs, some liberalization. Okay, so it's an ongoing process. It's not going to be something that you switch on one day and everything is bright all over the continent. It's not going to happen that way. If you take the countries in conflict, for example, our neighbors, Somalia and then South Sudan, you ask yourself, are they really ready to? So it will be, I think, staggered. But the important thing is that those that will be ready and will have the tools will start, and then the others will join.
We have a lot of agreements. We even have protocols that African countries have signed. But when it comes to the implementation of these protocols, for instance, the free movement of persons, or a removal of trade barriers or non-tariff barriers, the implementation of these protocols and these agreements has not been optimal.
Yes, there are so many protocols that have been signed by different regs. There are so many good programs that have been established at continental and regional level, but when it comes to implementation, I think there is a lot of work to be done at national level.
At this stage, many African countries are nervous about lowering tariffs because that would mean national revenues going down. Now, what ECOWAS did in the past, which probably could be one of the best practices that we learn from, is to introduce a compensation scheme. So countries that were losing when we introduced the trade liberalization scheme actually were compensated.
So we don't want to be so harsh against ourselves. We are coming from very, very far, but we are in a good position today. because we believe that a lot of things has been done in order to boost this intra-African trade.
Regional integration requires political commitment as well. You know, we may recognize that we need cross-border infrastructure, we need to harmonize policies, we need to have free movement of people, but at the heart of it, the political leadership is really very critical. And I think if you look at those places where the political leadership, the political leaders have come forward, have been in front in terms of advocating regional integration and explaining why they think it's important, I think you see success. So we should also remember that political commitment is really an anchor